Deshaun Watson declined to be interviewed for the piece tonight on HBO's Real Sports. But earlier this week, his lead defense attorney, Rusty Hardin, was on the Between the Lines podcast, and it's about sports and law. Hardin gave an update as to where this investigation is.
I've talked to the NFL for a total of 3 days so far. I think by the time this is over, these will be the longest interviews in the history of the NFL of anybody that they're investigating. They've indicated they want to continue to do some more questioning. And so that portion is still ongoing because as of yesterday, they felt like they hadn't gone through everyone. So that's pending. I don't have a deadline. I suspect the NFL wants to conclude their investigation sometime this summer, but whether that is June or whether that's August or July, I have no idea. That's their schedule. What happens mechanically is that the investigators will make a recommendation to Goodell. They will issue their findings. We will have an opportunity to respond to their findings. And then Mr. Goodell will decide what punishment, if any, they are going to recommend or what they're going to offer. We will decide whether we accept that or whether we want a hearing before the independent arbitrator, who now is truly independent. She is a retired federal judge, and it's a much fairer process, ultimately, I think, than was previously the case. These are changes that were in the collective bargaining agreement.
So Hardin, in that same podcast, Tim, also made the point several times that he and Deshaun Watson's cooperation with the NFL is unprecedented. Here's again Rusty Hardin from that podcast.
He's been interviewed adversely for 3 days, and there are no rules of evidence. And there are no rules of what you can't ask. So you take the average citizen and put him in, and trained former prosecutors, no matter how professional they may be, are free to ask him anything they want. And that's what he just spent 3 days doing.
And are you at that point able to object, or are you able to advise him not to answer?
That's a good question. Maybe I should put my malpractice carrier on notice, because I didn't object to any of the questions. I didn't tell him, as you obviously, as your question implies, conduct it like a deposition where you can instruct your client not to answer. We have said from the beginning that we were going to fully cooperate with the NFL at the same time we would cooperate with everybody. I think they would have to admit that we have more fully cooperated than anyone in the history of the NFL.
And again, Tim, let's put in perspective, this is Deshaun Watson's defense attorney, his lead defense attorney. So this is being painted under those eyes.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously anything Rusty Hardin says, we have to take with a grain of salt, both sides of this whole thing. I think that's the reality. Is I think we have to understand, and we have to get used to, for however long this takes. There's the two sides of the trial, the plaintiff and the defense, and the reality is going to be somewhere in the middle. But I think it behooves Deshaun Watson to cooperate with the NFL investigation if he truly believes that he didn't do anything wrong, and he said so as much. Back in his introductory press conference a few months ago, he said he believes he's innocent. He believes he doesn't need counseling, therapy, any of that stuff. If he truly believes that, then he should be cooperating with the NFL fully. And Rusty Hardin also brought up an interesting point when it comes down to potential suspension for Deshaun Watson. It's not directly in Roger Goodell's hands. It's in the hands of the independent arbitrator. So I think anything in terms of like a potential track record, what we've seen with several players that have had suspensions or whatever, those were handed down by Roger Goodell. This is a completely different path we're down. So this is more of the test trial of this new system in which, players can be punished through the personal conduct policy. So we don't really know how this is going to play out. But, I think it would obviously be in the best interest, I think, of the Browns and the NFL, just have some kind of resolution before training camp so the Browns can go into camp, whether knowing one way or the other, whether Deshaun Watson is going to be able to start week 1, or if they have to go with Jacoby Brissett, for 4 to 6 to 8 games, potentially even an entire season. We don't know how long that could be because, again, we have no track record. But, the earlier the NFL gets out with this, the earlier the NFL could complete this thorough investigation, the better it's going to be for everybody involved. And we're just going to have to see. It's just kind of a waiting pattern. It's just going to come down to all the evidence, the investigators find, and ultimately what the independent arbitrator decides.